Hi, I'm Anna Morgan and I'm an author. My most recent book is called Before the Beginning, this one here. It is the story of four teenagers who are on schoolies week, and on the first night of schoolies they meet a mysterious stranger and they decide to abandon their usual typical schoolies plans and go camp on an uninhabited island with her. And you get to find out a little bit more about each of the four characters. They each narrate part of the story, and Sierra, the mysterious girl who has brought them there. So this is my first book, All That Impossible Space. It came out in 2019. It's the story of Lara. She's a 16-year-old girl, and it's mainly about a complicated friendship she has with two other girls in her year. So it's like a friendship triangle in a way. But also it's got a true crime mystery woven throughout, which is based on the true story of the Somerton Man, which I became completely obsessed with as I was writing this story. And my characters are researching it as a history assignment in this book. So there's those two narratives weaving together, Lara's story and the true crime of the Somerton Man. Why do I write? I've always loved writing, and I think it's always been the way that I have made sense of the world around me. So for a long time I was writing, just in a journal or writing for myself. But becoming a professional author, I suppose I first wanted to take writing seriously because I loved reading so much. Books were always incredibly important to me. They still are incredibly important to me. But especially growing up, I felt like the characters I met in books were like my friends, and it helped me understand and make sense of the world around me. And if I can give part of that gift to another reader, I would feel so honoured to be a part of that. And I think writing is a way that I feel like I can both understand the world around me and also be understood and make myself understood. Writing in 2020 was very interesting. I actually, in the first lockdown in April, I was on a really tight edit deadline for my second book. So that was great because my life when I'm on edit deadline is pretty much like isolation. So I didn't see any of my friends, which, I wasn't allowed to see any of my friends, but I didn't have any of that feeling like I was missing out because I was just writing, eating, sleeping all day. But then I handed in the book and I didn't have that distraction, and then 2020 started to get me down a bit. And I suppose, like a lot of creative people, I'm sure it's been quite hard to be creative in this year. And it's hard to be creative when you're just focused on surviving day to day. So I didn't do a lot of all those amazing things that people did, like making sourdough bread and getting really fit. I wasn't doing any of those things. But just in the last few months, I've started to feel that creative spark coming back, which is really nice. I'm not a full-time writer. I work in a bookstore about 3 days a week, which I love. I love having my whole life be about books in some way. So one of my favourite reads, which is a book for children, sort of a book for children, but I think adults will read it and love it as well, is The Year the Maps Changed by Danielle Binks. I read this, I think it was quite early in the year, in the first 6 months of the year, when all the news anxiety was making it really hard for me to focus on anything. I read this book and I was completely swept away by it, absolutely loved it, and it was such a joy to be completely in that world for a while. So that's a historical fiction set on Mornington Peninsula in the 1990s, around the time that a whole group of refugees arrived in the area. And you're really focused on Fred, the main character, who I think she's 11 or 12 in the book, and she's just starting to discover her own moral compass, and she's got sort of tricky, changing relationships in her family and her friendships. And then this new group of people arrives in her town and kind of shakes everything up. And that character is so well drawn, so beautifully written, and really captures the intense emotions of that age. So yes, that's one of my standout reads of last year. I love reading probably more YA than younger. YA has always been one of my favourite genres to read, which is why I love to write it. And I think a lot more adults would love YA writing if they gave it a try. It's interesting feedback I often get from friends or family of mine who are lovely and really supportive and read my books. And then they're kind of surprised and they're like, oh, yours is the first book that I managed to finish in years or in months. And that's because YA writing is really, really good. It's often very well plotted, so it has that kind of page turn ability. But there's so much variety in YA writing, and I think some of the most interesting and thoughtful and really creative writing is happening in that space. So yes, I love reading YA books, especially Australian YA. I think we're really lucky with the Australian YA authors we have. The first one that comes to mind, especially for YA books, is Jacqueline Moriarty. I remember reading Feeling Sorry for Celia when I was about 16 or 17, I think, and just feeling like, oh, here is someone whose brain works like my brain works. She's got such a great sense of humour and this sort of whimsical nature to her writing. I loved all her books, especially that early trilogy, which is set in high schools in Sydney. So that really set me off writing, and I think made me realise that there are heaps of different voices in writing and in writing for teenagers, and maybe gave me that spark that there'd be room for my voice as well. I remember writing a fairy tale when I must have been 7 or 8. And I think I thought I was going to be really clever, and I had a fairy tale where the prince was a really bad king, but there's this shepherd boy who was, secretly the king, which obviously is a huge cliche, but at the time I thought I was being really inventive. And I also remember writing a short story about my guinea pigs getting lost and finding their way home. So there you go. Maybe there's a picture book in there. So I am working on something new. It is still in such early stages that it's hard to talk about, but I would love to keep writing. So hopefully there'll be a new book, probably not next year, but maybe the year after. And I'd love to keep writing for this age group. I love writing for teenagers. So fingers crossed something new will be coming. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the great questions and for supporting local authors.